Hello, YouTube. This is my first video, and it's the first in a series of videos that I hope to make that will act as a GameMaker tutorial of sorts. GameMaker is a popular programming piece of software that you can use, basically, to make games pretty easily. So GameMaker is normally pretty easy to learn, but I'm going to be making these tutorials so you can just get into it right away and start making your very own games. So with that said, in this video I'm going to be covering some of the more basic aspects of GameMaker and how some of its more important resources work. But right off the bat, we can see we have the title screen. There's some nice tabs up here. Well, it starts you off on the Welcome tab, and right down here this sort of works like the Open Recent function on a lot of other programs. If you've been using projects recently, you can just click on them to open them. You can also open projects the conventional way, just going into the folders. You can make a new project here. This is the only place actually to make a new project. Actually, I don't think that's true. Completely forget I said that. And then you can also import projects from previous versions of GameMaker. So pretty standard title screen. I'm just going to get into the actual project, like the Open Recent functionality right down there, and bam, we're in the project window. So right over here you can see there's a GameMaker news section. I think I don't know if you're able to get rid of that, but I'm just going to leave it there because I haven't bothered to check. But over here you can see the really important stuff. So there are all these different folders and all these different buttons up here. So as you can see, there's all these folders and they're labeled sprites and backgrounds and shaders and stuff. And you might be asking, what does this all mean? Well, I'll be covering most of these in their own videos, but I'm going to be going over the most important ones today, which I find to be sprites, objects, and rooms. So let's start with sprites. So you can click the little red Pac-Man button up here, and it's telling me that you press that to create a sprite. But you can basically name the sprite, so I'm just going to call that sprite 1. And it basically creates an empty sprite over here in your sprites folder. So you can name the sprite, sprite 1, I've called it. There are some other settings around here. You can set the origin of the sprite in terms of X and Y. Currently 0, 0 is the upper left corner of the image. So when you get to programming in the coordinate grid, which we'll do probably pretty soon, then that's where it'll calculate from if you have an image attached to an object. So we can edit the sprite, and I'm just going to create a new sprite here. And we can go inside. So it's just sort of an image editor like MS Paint or things like that. I'm just going to draw down some nice black pixels over here. Maybe I'll add some red. But yeah, so now we have an image. Beautiful artwork, I know. And we can click Show Preview to see the image. It's pretty zoomed out at the moment, but you can see that it's there. So this is not all you can do with sprites, though. So sprites are image files. As you can see, I've added an image. And if I did exit out of this, I'm not, but if I did exit out, you'd see that over here it would take that form of that image. But there are some other things you can do with sprites. So if I click over here, you can see it adds an empty image at the end. And you can see that it's flickering over here. That's because I've added a completely transparent new image. So if I make some more squiggles, this time I'll do like red with a little bit of black. We can see that it animates between the two squiggles. And if I set the speed a little down, you can definitely see the first image and then the second image. And I can slow this down even further, so it's only about 2 frames per second. But yeah, so that's what you do with sprites. They're basically animations, and you can have solid images if you just have 1 frame. So I'm going to save that for now just by clicking OK. And let's get into objects. So you can create an object, as it says over here, by clicking the blue ball icon, and you can name it just like any other resource. All these resources can be named. But I'm going to call it object 1, and you can set a sprite for it. So now I'm going to set it to sprite 1, so it appears like that in the actual game. Then there are some other settings down here. You can set whether it's visible, you can set whether it's solid and persistent, parents and masks. This all may seem kind of complicated. I'm just going to be leaving these alone for now. Just leave it as visible, and depth 0. Depth is sort of like whether it goes over other objects. So if you had 2 images, it determines whether one is going to be drawn over the other or cover up the other. But that's really all there is to say about that. Now, the real reason why objects are so important is because they're how your game actually runs code. So what I can do is I can add an event here, and events are sort of like triggers. So there's the create event, which will trigger as soon as the object is created, or at least the first moment in time in which it exists in a room. So I'm just going to put that down there as an example, but we can look through some of the others. Step is pretty important. It's sort of a constant event, triggers every single frame. Draw triggers every single frame, but it draws like rectangles and other shapes and things like that, other sprites. Destroy triggers when the object is destroyed. A lot of these are pretty self-explanatory, and I'll be covering most of them in their own videos, but yeah. So then over here you can actually see these blocks. And so there's like move blocks over here, like this will say move fixed or move free. These are not too important. If you wanted to get into GameMaker and just sort of like teach yourself it without any programming experience whatsoever, you could try to use these and figure them out. Like these will allow you to set like direction and speed and things like that. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do all text-based code. So I'm going to drag and drop this block, the code block, in here. And as you can see, it opens this text window. So in this text window, I can just type in any text I want. There are some special keywords like the X and Y variables. There are some functions like if I say like string or collision rectangle. Those are special functions that are included in the program, and those have special effects. But for now, I'm just going to leave this blank. I'll just remove the action. But yeah, so we basically have an object with no code, but with a sprite now. And so with that, we can go on to the final resource in this video, which is the room. So you can create a room, as it says, with this rectangle icon. And if we just jump to settings, we can name it room 1. Excuse me, that's 3 O's. We can set its width and height in terms of pixels. And we can set its maximum frames per second. So I'm going to set that to 60. So you can see that there's a grid here. And the way rooms work is that they're basically where you put your objects down. So the grid is a little too large for a 16 by 16 pixel object, so I'm just going to shrink that down a little bit. But yeah, so if I want, I can just sort of stamp down a bunch of objects. They're not really going to do much, but if these had code, oh, and by the way, you can move around the view of the room with this little rectangular thing in the corner. It's pretty useful. But you can basically just stamp down objects, and if any of these objects had code, or if there were more than one object that could react with each other, they would all be doing that. So I'm just going to turn this grid off, and you can see what the room looks like. So yeah, so this is our room right now. It's got a bunch of objects in it. I'm just going to save this for now, because we've actually created something that we can run at this point. So if I click the Run the Game button up here, the one next to it is Run Debug, and it shows some other useful stuff. But we can see that they're sort of flickering. And actually what I should do is I should set the maximum frames per second a little lower. Or really a lot lower. So if I set it to 5, you'll be able to see this a lot better. But if I click Run the Game again, we can just wait a little second, and we can see every single one of these objects is animating. So yeah, that's pretty much how sprites, objects, and rooms work on a pretty basic level. That's really all I have to say for this video. See you next time, YouTube.